Hello, and thank you for joining us. I would like to welcome you to today's Microsoft Office System webcast, Top 10 Tips for Microsoft Office Excel 2007. For more Microsoft webcasts, go to microsoft.com/webcast. I'd now like to introduce our presenter today, Evan Archila. During his 8 years at Microsoft, Evan Archila earned his reputation as a trusted technology advisor through the development of end-user programs and activities for the Microsoft Home and Retail Division, Windows XP, Windows XP Tablet PC Edition, and the Microsoft Office System. Evan is the co-author of an upcoming Microsoft Press book featuring tips and tricks for the 2007 Microsoft Office System. Evan, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thanks Eric. Well, I want to welcome everybody again to Top 10 Tips for Microsoft Office Excel 2007. We're going to spend about the next 45 to 60 minutes together talking about some of the advances that have been made in Excel 2007 and giving you kind of a list of some of the things that I personally think are pretty cool about this new technology and some of the ways that it has helped me in terms of getting more out of my spreadsheet information. I am absolutely the first one to tell you that I am not an absolute know-it-all expert in Excel. I'm not a numbers guy. Word, on the other hand, is a product that I enjoy spending a lot of time in. But when it comes to Excel and I'm dealing with numbers, just my personality involved here, there's always a bit of a wariness on my part to actually get into Excel and begin to use some of the technology there. And what I really like about Excel 2007, it has taken away a lot of that intimidation, I guess, that I would have felt with Excel in the past by making it much easier to be able to get into my spreadsheets and be able to work with data, work with numbers, work with different types of information in a much more structured view than I typically am comfortable with, and be able to get a lot more out of that information. So I hope as we go through the course of the presentation today, you'll find that whether you're an Excel novice or intermediate user like myself, or whether you're an advanced user, you're going to find some things today that I think you'll be able to apply regardless of your skill level and be able to get something out of the top 10 tips we're going to cover off in this presentation. Now, before we get kind of into the meat of the demo, I want to cover off on just a couple of elements about the Office system. Now, if you've been on our webcast for the top 10 tips for email and for Word, this is a little bit of repetition for you, but I can't always guarantee that everybody on the call today is new. So I want to just set the stage here with what we're going to get into as we look at Excel today. When we think about the Office system, this is a concept that was introduced back in 2003 with that release. And the idea here is that Office is now moving beyond the desktop. So we don't come in today to work and everything that we do is confined within our PC, our laptop, or our desktop. We're coming in, we're sending email, we're putting things out on network locations, we're working across different boundaries with people. And so as we do this type of information work, then Office needs to be able to adapt and to grow to that new environment. And so the Office system represents not only Word, Excel, and PowerPoint and these applications that you're familiar with, but also other elements like Windows SharePoint Services and Office SharePoint Server, which we'll look at a little bit later today. Things like InfoPath, OneNote, Groove is a new application that's now part of the Office system in terms of collaboration. So you're finding that there's a lot of technologies that are out there that are working together in a very integrated fashion to make it easier for you to do particular things at work. What we'll look at today in particular is something around this idea of delivering better results faster. This is this idea that you can get into your technology, you can get into that application and be able to have more professional looking content come out the other side of the time that you spend there. But it took you a lot fewer steps than it would have in the past. And part of this is due to the new user interface of Office that we'll talk about today. And I'll walk you through some of the highlights of how to use and get familiar with that new interface. Getting more out of your information. This is about having data or having information maybe on a server location somewhere that you can really mine for everything that it's worth. So you've got a spreadsheet in front of you. Let's take an example from Excel. You know, how can I look at that information? How can I sort it, filter it, apply some conditional formatting, work it into a pivot table? Just take that static set of information and really turn it and spin it any way that I need to be able to get every ounce of information out of that. Working together more effectively. This is about collaboration. I hesitate to use that word. It's a bit of a mouthful, carries a lot of marketing connotations with it. But what we're essentially saying here is it's easier for people to be able to work together. And we'll certainly talk about that today as it relates to Excel in terms of sharing spreadsheet information with others. Processes and content. Once you have all that information out there, you've got a document or a spreadsheet, how do you move it through its life cycle? So what are the policies, for example, that govern that document or spreadsheet? How long does it live? Who can access it? When should it be audited? Does it need to be approved? Do I need to route it somehow through the organization to different people to be able to buy off on that document so that I can finalize it? So how can we automate some of this busy work that we run into where we've got to take care of these different types of processes, document management, content management? So you'll find things in the Office system that talk particularly to those areas as well. In the spirit of better results faster, you have probably heard or seen for yourself that we do have a new user interface within Office. And a lot of people are asking, why did you do this? Why did Microsoft make this significant change? And the answer to that is quite simply that Office over the past several versions has really, it's kind of outgrown itself. If you go back to Word 1.0, you had a product there that had about 50 menu items and about 100 different commands. If you go forward to Word 2003, you had a product that had just about 300 menu items and more than 1,500 different commands. And what happens is those features are added in each subsequent version of the product. Well, people start to either lose things that they used to know how to do. It might still be in the product, but it's moved into a different location. You can't find it. It takes a lot of time clicking around through menus and toolbars trying to find the feature that you want to use. But more than that, it prevents people from taking advantage of new functionality that may have been in the product for several versions now, but you didn't know about it because, again, this information is lost within the structure that simply wasn't built to handle that much functionality. So what we've done is we've torn that structure down and we've rebuilt it from the ground up. So now these commands and this functionality is much easier for you to find and take advantage of. And you'll see it represented in what we call the ribbon. Now this ribbon you're looking at here in particular is from Word, but you'll notice when we get into Excel, they pretty much look the same in terms of how they're structured. But the tabs that are available to you in each product obviously vary according to the product that you're working in, and they make sense for the functions that you're going to want to access within that product. So we'll take a look at that. We'll have a deeper dive in how you can work within that interface. But I want you to be aware of it. And it is currently available to you in Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Access, and Outlook. Now in Outlook in particular, you won't see it in the main Outlook console, but you will see it if you open up a message or a contact or an appointment. You will see the ribbon when you actually get into one of those Outlook items. So specifically in terms of Excel, what are we going to talk about today? Well, I'm going to show you a few ways that you can create better spreadsheets. We'll look at the new results-oriented interface. We're going to talk about some significant changes as it relates to spreadsheet capacity. We'll format some cells and tables, and we'll also create a chart and share that chart across some other applications. So look at some pretty basic stuff there. Then when we get into talking about analysis, I'm going to show you some great new tools for sorting and filtering, applying conditional formatting, and then creating those pivot tables and charts. And finally, we'll talk about sharing that information with other people. We'll look at that in a couple of different ways. We'll convert a spreadsheet into a PDF, and I'll show you exactly how you can do that within Excel. We'll also use something called Excel Services to share a spreadsheet with other people. And we'll also use that same technology to share something out, define what we would call parameters in a spreadsheet so that you can share something out for what we would call what-if types of analysis. So what if I change this variable, what's that going to give me? Some different types of calculators and things like that you can make available to other people to be able to use on their own. That'll make more sense as we get into that section of the demo. But these are the three kind of buckets that I've grouped our 10 tips into, and we'll just jump into the demo and start kind of taking a look at these different elements. So if you'll bear with me for a second, I am going to share out a virtual PC. And we're going to start in this particular spreadsheet here. What you should be looking at is Excel 2007. It says FY07 sales report. This is just a very basic spreadsheet that I put together for the purposes of this demonstration. And what you see across the top is what I talked about in terms of the ribbon. Now the ribbon has replaced your menus and toolbar structure that you're familiar with in previous versions of Office. What the ribbon does is it groups your commands across a set of command tabs, and you'll see those tabs here across the top. And each of these tabs contains commands that are relevant to how you are working within the application. So we're on the Home tab right now. You'll see things for adjusting fonts and number formatting. We'll look at some of these additional features here in detail as we move throughout the presentation. But you'll also find a tab for formulas. So working with formulas is a common thing in Excel. You'll also find something tab for working with different types of data connections or doing data validation, some other types of things as it relates to data. So you'll notice as you move through these different command tabs that you have access to those different types of features within these different groups. Now up at the top left you see a Microsoft little Office logo here. This is called the Office button. Clicking that will show you what used to be under the File menu. So your printing, saving, your new command. These items are here underneath the Office button, as well as some additional commands for document preparation, for publishing documents, working with different types of workflows if you happen to be in a SharePoint environment. So you'll find that type of information here. If you click on Excel Options, this is where you have your different application options for customizing how the application actually functions and some of the default settings, etc. That is where that information now exists. It's under the Office button, under the the Options setting. You'll also notice above the ribbon and just to the right of the Office button is a Quick Access toolbar. This is where you have your undo and redo commands. You can also customize this with other quick commands, so the save icon for example, and you'll notice here I can customize this toolbar, add additional commands to it. So the ribbon, the Office button, and that Quick Access toolbar, those are really kind of the primary things that you need to know about as it relates to the structure of the new user interface. Now in Excel, in particular, there are some other enhancements that you should be aware of just from a general spreadsheet perspective. At the bottom right here, I've got a little zoom bar. And if I zoom that all the way out, I want you to notice just how small that set of data is getting. If you've worked with Excel in the past, you know that you were limited in the amount of information that you could add and insert into your spreadsheet. You now have the ability to use over 1 million rows and 16,000 columns. So it's 1,048,576 rows to be precise by 16,384 columns. So if you've ever worked in Excel, you found yourself limited by the capacity of older spreadsheets, you now will find that that capacity is greatly increased. There are other increases in Excel that you should be aware of. The number of rows allowed in a pivot table chart, for example, has increased from 64,000 to over 1 million, and the amount of memory that Excel can use has increased from 1 gig to the maximum allowed by Windows. So there are a number of just enhancements that have been made across the spreadsheet structure, the workbook structure, just to make this be able to hold a lot more data than you've worked with in the past. Let me bring this back up to a 100% view. And on the View tab, while we're here, let me also point out to you the Page Layout tab. I'm sorry, Page Layout command. If you'll click that, if you've ever had trouble seeing how a spreadsheet's actually going to look on the printed page, if you've printed it out, you've gone to the printer 3, 4, 5 times trying to get it exactly right, you don't have to worry with that anymore. You can use the Page Layout view, and you can see a spreadsheet exactly how it's going to look on the printed page. This also gives you the ability to quickly add things like headers. So let's just call this the FY07 sales report. And while I'm here in the header, let me also point out to you, notice this tab here at the top. It says Header and Footer Tools, and then there's a Design tab underneath it. This is called a Contextual Command tab. There are certain command tabs you'll find in Office that only show up once you actually have a particular element within the document. So you don't necessarily need these tools cluttering up the ribbon and cluttering up your workspace if you're actually not working in the header at this particular moment. So once I'm in the header, then I have the header tools, and then I'm able to actually select from commands here. So let's just do a couple of things. Let's add the date. So I want to have a current date in that particular quadrant of my header. Let's go to our footer, and let's just say we want the page number down here at the bottom. Now, if I click outside of the header, notice that those tools go away. So they're only there when I'm actually working in the header or footer, then I'm presented with that contextual command tab. When I don't need them, they disappear, they hide out of view, and I don't have to have something else to navigate within the ribbon when I'm trying to work on this particular spreadsheet. And you'll see here that I've got the current date, the page number, I've typed in that header information. So it's very easy to be able to do that inside of Excel 2007. Let's go back up to the top, go back to the normal layout. You can simply switch back and forth. Once you've gone into page layout and view, you'll also see a little dotted line here. That lets me know when I'm in this view where the edge of the page is. So it's just another helpful way to get you focused on what you're working on here and not worrying about how many trips to the printer you're going to have to make before this thing turns out right. Let's look at some ways to work with this data. So this is a pretty straightforward set of information. We'll go back over to the Home tab. One of the ways that Excel 2007 makes it easier to work with information is the ability to take any set of data and format it as a table. Now in the past this was referred to as a list feature. That's a little bit of a confusing name for what we're doing here because essentially we're creating a table, not a list. We already really have a list of information here. So you'll notice here at the top under the Styles group we have Format as a Table. Clicking that will give you a table gallery. This is an example of a gallery that kind of shows you, before you apply a particular command, what you're going to get on the other side of it. So this is a feature that's common across the ribbon. Certain command tabs have galleries, and within those galleries then you can see a visual display of the result of any particular command. In this case I want to create a table that looks like this one in the middle here, so I'll just select it. Notice that my data is already selected for me. You just kind of want to verify that that's happened. Also, you want to check this box that says My Table Has Headers, if in fact, like mine, your table does have headers across the top of the columns. Click OK, and notice now that in one click there I've got a nice set of data here. I've created a table. I've got sorting and filtering buttons at the top. It's got a nice look and feel to it. Now once this information is in the table, if you've ever had that problem of looking at a lot of different information, a long spreadsheet for example, what happens when you scroll down to the bottom of a long spreadsheet? Well, sometimes you forget which column you're actually working in. So you have to scroll back to the top and go, okay, I'm in the Q2 column right now, and then you can scroll back down to the data and work with it. But you're constantly doing this kind of up and down because you lose your place. What I want you to watch here is look at my headers across the top. Keep your eyes focused here at the top. Because I have this now in a table, if I scroll down in the table, notice how those column headers dock themselves up at the top. So let me just kind of do that for you again. As I move back up, notice here they are at the top. And as I get too far down the page here, they dock themselves. So I always know exactly where I am within this spreadsheet. Now this is something that you have to be in a table to be able to use. If you're just scrolling down in a regular spreadsheet, you won't see that docking capability. But if you take that data and you convert it into that table, you format it as a table, then you have the access to work with that type of information. There are also some other interesting things that you can do here within this table. So let's say, for example, that I wanted to add a column. Well, rather than right-click and insert column, I'll simply come over here to where I want the column to be, type what I want to call it, and hit Enter. And notice how the formatting automatically expands to that new column. Once I have that new column, let's say I want to insert a formula. The bracket key will now bring up a list of your column headers. So rather than have to go B6 times E5 plus F7, it's a very cryptic way of working, and you're constantly looking back to see what is E, what is F. If instead you could go, I want to just take my gross revenue and I want to multiply that times my margin. Hit enter. Notice not only is the formula completed, but it's also copied down the rest of the table. Let me expand this just a little bit for you. So you'll see in just a couple of clicks, I've got a formula, and I've also expanded it throughout the rest of this particular column. So I don't have to drag it down anymore. I just hit enter and it happens. Now there's a smart tag. You don't see it now. Once I expanded the column, it disappeared. But you could use that if you wanted to stop that behavior. If you wanted to not automatically copy those cells, you have the opportunity to change that however you wish it to be. But it's very, very easy to be able to work with this information and be able to dynamically expand it. Now, another capability that you have with a table is the ability to sort and filter. So here's my salesperson column. Notice here I can do some basic things. Let's just sort alphabetically. So we can sort by salesperson, and I can do it across these different filters, or I can come up to the Data tab, click the Sort button, and here you can add multiple levels of sorting. So for example, I've already done salesperson. You can see it here. But let's say within the salespeople, I want to add a level. And after I sort by salespeople, I'm going to sort by profit. And let's do that largest to smallest. And you'll notice I can add additional levels as well. So I can go down several levels deep in terms of how I want to sort and filter, sort this information. Let's click OK. And now we've performed that sort. Filtering is, we're kind of getting semantic here, but filtering is when you would come down, let's go into our salesperson for example, and let's just filter this on one particular salesperson. Click OK. And now I've filtered out everybody else that's not Devolio. And I can see this person's information right here within the spreadsheet. Let's do a couple of things here as it relates to working with this data. Let's apply some conditional formatting. I'm going to come back over here to the Home tab, and I need to select the gross revenue column. So let's select this table column. And if you've ever applied conditional formatting in the past, you could do it, but it required a few steps. You'll notice here under the Styles group in the Home tab, if I click conditional formatting, it gives me the opportunity to do things like let's apply some data bars. So let's say I want a visual cue as to which of these numbers are higher or lower, how they relate to each other. Now notice as I hover over these data bars, I'm not actually clicking this, I'm just hovering. And what you're seeing is what we call live preview. Certain galleries have a live preview functionality that lets you preview in your application, in your document or spreadsheet, what a change is going to happen, what it's going to look like before you actually apply it. So in this case, I can see, what's the green look like versus the red or the blue. And when I decide on the one that I want, I'll click it and apply that. You'll notice now I've applied some conditional formatting to that column, and at a glance I can see the larger numbers to the smaller numbers, and I don't necessarily have to go through and read every single column. There are other ways that you can work with conditional formatting. So let's take, for example, the margin column, and let's select that column. You'll also notice under conditional formatting that you can apply different types of rules. So I can do color scales or data bars and visual identifiers like that. I can also say, any of these results that are greater than 50%, so let's just leave that at 50%, I want those to appear with a green fill. Click OK, and you'll see that now everything over 50% I can see is green, and my eye immediately just goes to those things that are over 50% in margin. Let's select that column again. And let's add a rule that says everything less than 50% is red. Click OK. And you'll notice now that I can just at a glance see who's above and who's below 50% in margin. So I have a number of different ways to look at this and analyze this information. You can also sort based on color. So here I can sort by color. And let's say I want to bring all the over 50% people to the top, so we'll select the green, and I'll resort that spreadsheet based on what I'm trying to accomplish and the information that I'm trying to get out of it. So conditional formatting is a very easy thing to apply within Excel 2007. If you haven't used it before, or if you found it very time consuming, I think you'll be able to take advantage of a lot of this functionality going forward with Excel 2007. Let's do a couple of other things here. Let's go back to the salesperson column, and let's select all and bring back all of our sales reps. And what I'd like to do here is insert a pivot table. On the Insert tab, you will find all of the elements that you would want to insert into a spreadsheet. So whether it's a chart or a graph or a hyperlink or a picture. In this case, I'm looking for the pivot table. You'll notice that command right here. So Insert, Pivot Table. It selected the table for me, and I want to put it in a new worksheet, so I'll click OK. Now I have a pivot table. That's literally all there is to creating a pivot table. If you've never used a pivot table before, in 2 clicks you can have yourself a pivot table. Click the Insert tab, click Pivot Table, click OK. All right, 3 clicks, you can have yourself a pivot table. And what this does, it allows you to take that same list of data and be able to spin it, pivot it, and analyze it in a much richer way than you can when it's kind of in a flat format as we saw on that other spreadsheet. What you do in Excel 2007 is a little bit differently in terms of working with spreadsheets, with pivot tables. You'll notice on the right-hand side I have a pivot table list. And these are all of my column headers. And I can just simply select the ones that I want visible within this particular pivot table. So let's say I want salespeople, I want gross revenue, and I want profit. Notice that they are added down here into the pivot table values. Now, if I add, for example, country, notice it was added here as a row. Now, I'm going to take that and just simply drag it up to the report filter and make country kind of the overall point from which we're going to pivot and spin this information. So you can drag these different fields around. Do you want them to be columns or rows? Are they the values that you're looking for? Is it the overall filter that you're going to apply to that pivot table? Simply drag those bars around where you want them to be in the table, and it just updates automatically. Notice now that I've filtered by country, I can come up here to the top. Let's say I've got UK and USA reps here. Let's just go for the United States and just kind of filter down on the reps that are here in the US. And now I can take a look at that information in a whole different way than I would have on the other table. Now let's take this a step further. Notice the pivot table tools here at the top. That's again an example of a contextual command tab. What I want to do is add a chart. So let's add a pivot chart to this. Let's add a column chart. And notice I have a column gallery to be able to select the type of column that I want. So let's just take a regular 2-dimensional column and apply that chart automatically. So notice here's the chart. I also get a pane with which to filter down and adjust the information in this chart. So you can use this here much like you do over here in your pivot table field list. I'm going to close both of these out for now. Let's move the chart over here just slightly underneath the data. And you'll notice at the top you have pivot chart tools. Again, another example of a contextual command tab. When you're working with a chart, when a chart actually exists in your document, that's when you have access to these tools to be able to work on this information. Let's go to the Layout tab. And I'm going to select the vertical axis here. Let me just show you a few ways that you would work with this type of command tab. So in this case, I want to format that selection. And I need to go over to the number area, currency. And we're going to just go ahead and change the decimal places to 0. Click Close. Now notice I've added the $ to the vertical axis of our chart. The other thing I want to do is come over to the Design tab, and let's adjust the chart layout. So notice I have a layout gallery, and what I'd like to do here is actually be able to have a chart title and some axis titles. So notice with a click there, I just simply change the layout of that chart. So you can create whichever chart you want, Notice here that you have 11 different options for how you want that chart to appear. Where do you want the menu? Where do you want the title to appear? Do you want to have the titles on the axes or not? You have a number of different variables there. You can simply apply them with a click. In this case, I want to change the chart title. Let's just call it Sales Data. And let's just call the vertical axis dollars. And the horizontal axis we'll call salesperson. So notice how easy it was to be able to change that and work with that information. In the chart styles area up here at the top, I have a chart gallery that will show me the different types of charts that are available in terms of look and feel. Let's say I want to make this a green chart and I want to make it three-dimensional. So with a click, I've changed the color of that chart, I've changed the effects of the chart, and you can get much more granular than what I'm showing you here if you want to really get down into the beveling and the three-dimensional effects of these charts. You have those tools available to you up in the Pivot Chart tools at the top. If this was a regular chart that I'd made from the other table, it'd be Chart Tools. They're similar in the number of command tabs that they have, and they both are contextual. This is a shared charting engine in Office 2007, so let me also show you one other element here as it relates to charts. Let's go over to our PowerPoint presentation, and I'm going to insert a new slide here. I just want to call it Sales Data. Let's take the chart that we were working with, copy it, and paste it into PowerPoint. And notice what happens. At the top, I get a Chart Tools command tab. And if I click on that, you'll see I have the different Chart Tools commands that are available to me. This is a shared charting engine across Office. So even though I've created a chart in Excel, I can still work with it, change it, manipulate it as it would exist in PowerPoint or Word in the other applications that I pasted in. So you'll see that I have a little smart tag here. If I want to link this data to Excel, if I want to just paste it as a picture, I have the choice to do that. I also have the ability to come up here to the top, and let's just go back to a multicolored option here. So I can change this to match the theme of the PowerPoint presentation. I can even go so far as to change the chart type. So let's say that I want to go to something more like a bar chart. Let's select a bar chart option, click OK. And notice I've completely spun the type of chart that I'm using. So with a couple of clicks, you have the ability to really get down and customize these elements. But what's really nice about this is even though I've made it look this way in PowerPoint, if I go back over to Excel, notice it's still the same as it was when I left Excel. So I'm able to take that chart, put it into Word, put it into PowerPoint, and be able to work with it with that shared charting engine, that contextual Chart Tools command tab, and the original information in Excel stays intact. So some very powerful tools as it relates to charting within Excel and within the rest of Office 2007. Let's shift gears here for a little bit. We talked about just creating spreadsheets. We looked at some of the deeper analysis tools like conditional formatting and some of the sorting and filtering elements of our table. Let's talk now about how we would share this information with other people. What I want to get into here, first of all, is just something as simple as a PDF. So there is a capability within Office 2007 to be able to save your files as PDFs. Now this does require an add-in. The add-in is available for you from Office Online, and the last I looked, if you went to office.microsoft.com and clicked on Downloads, you would see about halfway down the page a little box that said Popular Downloads, and this Save as PDF was #1 on the most popular downloads. Chances are it's still #1. It's been a pretty exciting feature that you can add on to Office. That'd be the first place I'd go to check for it. Otherwise, you can start to filter down into Office 2007 and add-ons, and you can find it that way as well. But it was bubbling straight up to the top on that Downloads page. The way you use it is you click the Office button, click Save As, the little arrow here to the right, just hover over that and you'll get a list of ways to save the document. Here's where you will see PDF or XPS, So if you need to share this file with somebody that doesn't necessarily have Excel and you want to make sure that they're able to read it, you can save it directly as an Adobe Acrobat PDF file. So as I click Publish here, let's just give it a second, and what you'll see is the Acrobat Reader will open up and display for us the same spreadsheet that we've got in Excel in a PDF format, and that's what you're looking at here. So it's very easy to take an Excel file, a Word file, a PowerPoint file, and save them directly to a PDF format to be able to share that with people that may or may not have Excel 2007 or any version of Excel for that matter. It may be something you want to hand out at an event, any number of ways that you could work with this. But you do need to first download and install that add-in from Office Online, and there is no cost for that add-in. That's an easy way to share a spreadsheet. Let's kind of turn this up a little bit. There is a product that you're probably familiar with or you've at least heard about. I should say it's a technology, Windows SharePoint Services. It's a part of Windows Server 2003. It's a feature of that product, and it is something that will allow you to create different types of websites for storing and sharing documents. Now, Windows SharePoint Services is often confused with Office SharePoint Server, so let me kind of explain the differences here for you as we move into this next section. Windows SharePoint Services is the foundation for creating those sites. You can create those sites if you have Windows SharePoint Services. You can have a document workspace. You can store files. You can work on them with other people. However, if you think about an organization where a lot of those sites start to crop up and a lot of people are working in that manner, well, all of a sudden you have a lot of different silos of information. So what SharePoint Server does is it comes into that environment. It is a standalone product, and it takes all those Windows SharePoint Services sites and it aggregates them under itself. And it centralizes that information under a portal interface. So if you've heard of a portal, a company portal, SharePoint Server will give you a company portal from which you can access all of those different Windows SharePoint Services sites. You can search across them. You can create a site for yourself, for your own personal information. And another feature of SharePoint Server is something called Excel Services. Excel Services is a component of Office SharePoint Server that it brings to the table when you bring that into a Windows SharePoint Services environment. With Excel Services, you can take a spreadsheet and you can share it out to people in a couple of different and very interesting ways. So what I'm going to do first here is save this particular spreadsheet out to a SharePoint site. Let me just go to Save As, and I'm going to put this out on a particular server. The reason that I'm doing this is if you want to use Excel Services to share spreadsheet information, you must first have that spreadsheet saved to an existing SharePoint site. So I'm just going to save this out to a SharePoint site so that this document will now be up in an online location. So I could have gone to a site and uploaded it from there. In this case, I'm just saving it directly. You must have your spreadsheet out on a SharePoint site to be able to take advantage of Excel Services. Now, what does Excel Services bring to the table? Well, if you've ever had a spreadsheet, let's say this one here that we're looking at today, and you wanted to make it available to other people to be able to look at and manipulate, but you didn't necessarily want to give them the whole file. Sometimes you want people to see maybe the values of something, but you don't want them to know the formulas by which you arrived at those values. There may be proprietary information in the spreadsheet, so it's always a dilemma. Do I send this file out, or do I just maybe copy and paste some key data into an email and send it to somebody? With Excel Services, you have the ability to take an existing spreadsheet. So in this case, let's go to Publish. And you'll see right here Excel Services. What Excel Services does, it allows you to decide what exactly it is that you want to share with other people within this spreadsheet. So you'll see a button here that says, there's a checkbox for Open in Excel Services. That's checked. And there's a button that says Excel Services Options. By clicking this, I can decide, do I want to share the entire workbook? Or do I just want to share particular sheets? In this case, maybe all I want people to see is that pivot table report that I've been working with. So here's sheet 1. Notice sheet 1 down here at the bottom left. Let's say that's the only thing that I want to share out of this particular spreadsheet. So I'll click OK. Let's go ahead and save it. And what is happening is Excel Services is working with Excel to create an HTML version of this particular spreadsheet. What that will do is open up something we call Excel Web Access. That's basically a browser-based version of Excel that allows someone to manipulate and work with this pivot table without having to have access to the original file. So you'll notice that Internet Explorer is starting here. I'm going to maximize it. And Excel Web Access now is processing that data. So we've basically saved that original spreadsheet as an HTML version. I limited exactly which sheet it was that I was going to publish. So in this case, I just want people to be able to access the pivot table. And Excel Web Access is preparing that information for me. Once we have that spreadsheet available in the browser, then I could send that link to anybody within the organization. They could come out and they could actually look at that pivot table. They can spin it around and work with it. And I didn't have to give them the original file. Notice here, this is Excel Web Access. It looks very much like Excel. In fact, if you weren't to look at the top of Internet Explorer here, if you just focus down in the grid area, it looks exactly like Excel. And if I click on different cells here, you'll see it functions just like Excel 2007. Now this is a pivot table. So let's say I'm someone else within the organization. I come out here and I want to filter this table a little bit differently. Well, the filtering options are available to me within the browser. So let's say I want to look at the UK data. So I'll click OK. And notice that in the browser, the pivot table is refreshed, the chart is refreshed, and I'm able to look at this information in a different way. But notice that I don't have the access to actually move the table filters around and do the things that we did within Excel 2007. I've basically preserved just this view of the pivot table for people that want to work with it. So it gives Excel Services in SharePoint Server 2007 gives me a lot of control over how I share out this information. Let's look at this in a little bit different way. So let me close out Excel Web Access, and I'm also going to close out this particular spreadsheet. So give me just a second to do that. And we'll look at something else that Excel Services can do for you, and this is something we call parameters. So here's a calculator. And calculators are great for doing what we call what-if analysis. So what if my margin was 30% instead of 23%? What would this deal look like? What if the quantity was 250 units versus 144? Calculators are great for doing that type of analysis. With Excel Services, you can take a calculator like this and you can open up different cells for people to be able to input their own information. These cells have to be values. They can't be formulas. They have to be a value cell. So it has to be the result of a formula. So in this case, here I have a markup field, a markup cell. This is not a formula, it's a value, it's a static number that I can put in here and adjust this particular calculator. So this is a cell for which I could come up, go to the Formulas tab, and click Define Name. Type in markup, click OK. And I've now defined this cell as markup. I can do the same thing for quantity. So let's take this quantity cell. This is a variable cell. You can put in whatever quantity you want and adjust the way the calculator outputs its data. Let's again define a name. So let's go to quantity. That's what we'll call this particular cell. Now once you've defined those names, the process is essentially the same as it is for the other example of Excel Services that we looked at. So the first thing I need to do is get this out to a SharePoint site. Again, you must have your spreadsheet on a SharePoint site before you can use Excel Services. So let's go ahead and put this out on server 2/sales, just like I did the other one. And once I've saved that to the server location, I'll again publish it to Excel Services. Excel Services Options. Now in this case, let's narrow this down to an individual sheet. All I want to show is the pricing calculator. I don't want to show the chart, so we're just going to share out this one particular sheet. under the Parameters tab, if I click Add, you'll see here the two names that I defined for those two cells. So here is markup and here's quantity. So I'm going to select both of these parameters and I'm going to add them to Excel Services. Click OK. Click Save. And now the same process is happening. We're taking this particular calculator and we are publishing it out to Excel Services, and we're going to be able to view it in Excel Web Access just like we did the earlier pivot table. Now notice here, because I have defined cells, I have these parameters, I get this pane that pops up on the right-hand side. It tells me what those are, markup and quantity. So in this case, if I'm a salesperson, for example, and I come out and I want to use this calculator to calculate a cost or a price of a particular opportunity, let's see what happens if the markup is 30% and the quantity changes to 250. Simply put that in, click Apply, and notice how the calculator is recalculated to represent the variables that I put in the task pane to the right. So I can perform any kind of, what if my margin changes to 50%? What if I'm getting 10%? What if the customer bumps the deal to 300 units? How does that affect the size of this opportunity? Any salesperson could come out to this particular calculator, use it in the browser, and perform that type of analysis. But I didn't actually have to give them the native file. There's not multiple versions of that same file floating around the organization. And if I need to restore this back to the original, under the Update button at the top, you can see an option to reload the workbook. Click OK. And notice it takes me right back to 23% and 144. So the original has not changed. This is all strictly happening in the browser. It's temporary, and it's available for those people that I want to be able to access this information. Excel Services in Office SharePoint Server 2007 gives me a lot more control over sharing Excel information than I would have had in the past. Let's jump back out to the main presentation and just kind of recap what we've talked about today. We looked at some ways that you can use Excel 2007 to create better, more professional looking spreadsheets. I showed you the new results-oriented interface, and we looked at the capacity. Again, it's 1 million rows by 16,000 columns. It's actually a little bit more than that. There's some spare change added on the end of those numbers. But it's significantly bigger than it was in the past. So you have the opportunity for larger spreadsheets. You have the opportunity to quickly format different cells, format them as tables, work with the auto-expanding formatting and formula features, and turn that information into charts. We looked at the sorting and filtering capabilities, the multi-level sort, the ability to filter on the fly within your different sets of data. Conditional formatting. So not only did we use data bars, for example, to color cells to show different cell ranges, cell values as represented by the size of a color bar, so a visual cue as to what that is, but we also apply different types of rules. So greater than is green, less than 50% is red, and we can even sort by those different colors. So you have a number of options there for how you want to work with and analyze that data. And again, 3 clicks, insert pivot table, OK, you've got a pivot table, and you can then add a pivot chart from that. We also talked about the shared charting engine across PowerPoint and Word. In terms of sharing information, easiest thing to do, get that free download from Office Online and save your spreadsheets as PDF. Very simple thing to do with that add-on. If you have an environment where you're running Windows SharePoint Services and Office SharePoint Server 2007, you can use Excel Services to be able to share information securely with other people through the browser, through Excel Web Access. So you can decide what it is you want to share. You can even define specific parameters that open up cells so that people in the browser can actually input their own information into it and perform different types of analysis. So there's a number of great tools in Excel 2007. It gets even better when you're bringing in things like SharePoint, and the interaction across the other applications with the ribbon and with the new user interface is a very nice, very seamless experience. Let me give you my shameless plug for the day. Eric mentioned at the beginning that I'm the author of an upcoming book for MS Press. The book is actually out now. I've co-authored this with another one of our presenters, and I just want to make sure everybody is aware of it. It's called So That's How, and this is from Microsoft Press. And a lot of what you saw today and in our other Top 10 webcasts, Tiffany and I address in this book. It's very user-friendly. It's very easy to read and to follow through. We give you some tip jars at the end of each chapter, which will kind of recap, like we did today, kind of the top 10 things that you got out of that particular section. So want to make sure people are aware of it. It's on Amazon. It's at Barnes & Noble. It's at Borders. It's out there if you're interested in taking a look at it. So that's my shameless plug for today's webcast. Let me give you some additional information. Here are some links. You may find some more information. Microsoft.com/office/great-tips is the place to go for more webcasts. I will be doing a top 10 for PowerPoint, for Office SharePoint Server, and for Groove in the coming months. I think PowerPoint is later this month, SharePoint in April, and Groove is in May, I believe. Office.microsoft.com is Office Online. If you go there, click Downloads. You should see that PDF download available for you there. And Work Essentials is also a great place to go for specific information as it relates to your job or your particular discipline. So if you're in the legal profession, if you're an admin, if you're in sales or marketing, you'll find ways to apply Office 2007 to your job at the Work Essentials site. There's some great content out there. And I know we didn't talk about Windows Vista today, but I want to make sure you're aware that Microsoft.com/Windows Vista is the place to go for that information, and encourage you to check out that. There are some great advances in Windows Vista, and there are also some nice ways that Office and Windows Vista work together to help you to be more productive. So with that, I'm going to turn things back over to Eric. He's going to walk you through the Q&A process, and I will be back in just a minute.
Okay, I do want to remind you all, yep, you can submit text questions using that Ask button. Evan will be getting to those in just a moment here. For upcoming and previously live webcasts, go to Microsoft.com/webcast. The on-demand version of this webcast will be posted there. You can just go to the Microsoft.com/webcast, search through on-demand webcasts, and this webcast should be up there within 24 hours. Of course, if you got a webcast content idea or any other comments about the webcast, we'd love to hear from you. Got this URL right here. You can contact us. And all of these URLs, you'll be able to grab them and paste them into a browser. If you want to go file, print to PDF, you'll get a PDF and you can use all these URLs. I want to get up and give you all a good chance to fill out the survey. We really value your feedback on these webcasts. Let us know how we're doing. You'll notice there are two options: registered online and all other registered. Just go ahead and select the one that applies to you. And when you get to the evaluation, you'll notice there's a place where you can give numeric scores to the webcast. There is also a section where you can leave comments, and we do read those. It's really helpful if you have any comments about the webcast. It's great to get your feedback. Also, as a little incentive, by attending today's live webcast and submitting an evaluation, you will be entered into a drawing for a Zune media player. So nice little incentive there to fill out the survey while we're going through your questions. Evan, I see we got a number of questions in the queue. Would you like to answer these?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So let me kind of start by taking as many of these over the phone as I can. A couple of them I may have to actually do a little bit of research to get you an answer. So I always like to let people know I am in the live meeting room now. I will not leave until I've addressed every question, at least with a link, in the question manager. So please stick around. If I don't get to your question on the phone, I will be looking at it in the queue. It may take me a few minutes. I'll kind of take them as they come in. But if you leave the live meeting session, I can't get to your question. You'll drop out of the queue, and I won't be able to see your question. So if you want to have that question answered, please hang out for me for just a few more minutes. Let me give you just a few of these as I can over the phone. I've got a question here about a list of these new features. Where can you find out more? The best place to go is at office.microsoft.com, and if you'll click on Products, and then you can see on the left-hand side there'll be a list of all the products. If you go to Excel, you can access a product guide out there, which will basically run through what all the new features are. It's usually about a 20-page document or so that you can download and take a look at. That would be the best place to go if you're just looking for kind of the all-up list of what's new in Excel. And it will even have some things in there that I didn't talk about today. So I encourage you to do that. Office.microsoft.com. click Products, and then click on Excel, and you'll find a link in there for a feature guide. Let's look at some other things here. Okay, I've got a question about the expanded capabilities. That only available in the new Office formats. I haven't exactly tested this to know if it reduces the size of your spreadsheet. I don't think so. I think what I mean by that is I think the capacity is the same even if you down save it to Office 97 to 2003. However, the file size is going to be enormous if you're working on something of that size. If those of you who aren't aware of the new Office formats, there are it's called Office Open XML. That's the official name for it. And Office 2007 does have new file formats, and you can recognize them because if you have, for example, a spreadsheet .xls, in Office 2007 it would be .xlsx. That would tell you it's an Office 2007 file. Or .xlsm. The M tells you there's a macro in that file. So before you even open it, you know that the file contains a macro, and that's actually one of the benefits of the new file format is the ability to see that in your Documents folder without actually having to open it and expose yourself to potentially damaging macro. If it's got the M on it, you know it's got a macro in it right off the bat. Those file formats are nice because they have a number of great features. One I like in particular is the size. PowerPoint's a good example of this. If you have a huge PowerPoint presentation you're sending to someone, you'll find that PowerPoint as it's saved in the new format, so a PPTX file, for example, is going to be up to 75% smaller than the PPT file. So these file formats handle document size a lot better than the older formats. For people who don't have Office 2007, there is a converter that will allow them to open them and work with them so that they're not losing out by not having Office 2007. You can still share with them even if they aren't running the latest version. Going back to the file size discussion, because you have the 1 million rows and 16,000 columns here, that's going to be a big spreadsheet anyway. But if you down save it into the 97 to 2003 format, which you can do within Office, I would assume that the size of that is just going to be gigantic. Now, I haven't tested this, so don't quote me 100%. But I don't believe you lose the capacity. You still have the ability to have those huge spreadsheets. But when you down save it, you can rest assured that that size is going to be significantly greater than it was in the new native format. Let's see here what else we have. Conditional formatting. Are you still limited to 3 levels? I don't think so. Again, I haven't tested this 100%, but let's think back to my demonstration. I did the data bars, and then I did the rules for greater than and for less than. So there's 1, 2, 3 there. I did a lot of sorting and filtering. I have, in testing this demo, actually added color scales to a 4th column, and I was going to show that, but it just was taking too much time, and I think the idea was going to get across on what I already showed you today with the data bars and the rules. So I think right there I'm up to 4. So if that's what you're talking about, I have had data bars, color scales, greater than and less than all at the same time. So I don't believe that there is a limitation in terms of how you can apply that conditional formatting. I haven't experienced it. Certainly let us know if you run into something there. What functionality is lost when you kind of downgrade to the old file format? Great way to check that is what we call a compatibility checker. And this is available under the Prepare menu. If you click the Microsoft Office button, you'll see an option to prepare. That will give you a menu that has a feature called Compatibility Checker. What that does is it looks across your file and it identifies those things that are not compatible in previous versions. And we're talking about feature compatibility. We're not talking about the ability to open the file. The converter takes care of that. But we're talking about features that exist today that didn't exist yesterday, and it will flag for you what those are so you know going into it where people may have an issue and you'll have the opportunity to resolve those. PowerPoint's another good example here. If you use an animation, for example, that is new to 2007, well, 2003 obviously didn't have that animation in it, so someone who opens your PowerPoint file, they won't see that animation. But you can again use the compatibility checker to flag that in advance So you know going into it that that particular animation is one that you may want to change, or if it's not a big deal, you can just ignore it. Okay, let me clarify on my earlier answer about the capacity. I did just get from someone, thank you very much, I think it was Frank, who just tested for us the ability to save down in the older format, and it did give him a dialog box about the 256 columns and 65,000 rows. So I stand corrected on that one. But what I did say about file size will still hold true. So if you had a spreadsheet that was 256 by 65,000 in the new format, and you had that same spreadsheet in the old format, you can still expect that file size to be larger in the old format than it is in the new one. That's one of the benefits of the OpenXML format. So thank you, Frank. I'm sorry my information was wrong on that particular answer. The link again for the new features, let me give that to you guys again. It's office.microsoft.com. And on that page, if you'll click on the Products button, then you'll see the list of products on the left-hand side. And click Excel, and that will take you to the Excel page. And from there, you can access a feature guide that will give you all of the information on what's available in Excel. And it's usually about a 20 to 30 page Word document. I've got a question here about certification, the mouse certification, the prep books, the tests, etc. I have not seen this stuff yet, but I haven't actively been looking for it. There's typically a little bit of a lag time once the products are launched before this stuff starts to appear. Microsoft.com/learning is the best resource for that, Microsoft.com/learning. That's where you can go to find out about the user certifications as they become available. I'm sure they'll be posted to that site. Now, Microsoft Press does have a number of titles out right now for learning these products. So That's How, which is the book that I wrote with Tiffany Songvalet, that's out today, as are the Step-by-Step and some of the other series that you may be familiar with. So some of that stuff is kind of already rolling out, and I'm sure more of it will be coming as we move along. Okay, I'm going to take these other questions offline if that's okay. I know we're at the 12 o'clock mark here. I want to thank everybody so much for joining us for today. I hope this was helpful for you. I will take these other questions in the queue. So please, if you have a question in there that you want answered, just bear with me. I will get to you as soon as I can. Thank you so much for joining us today. I look forward to seeing you on PowerPoint later on this month. And Eric, I'm going to turn it back to you.
I do want to thank Evan Archila for presenting today, and thank you everyone for attending today's webcast. That concludes today's Microsoft Office System webcast. You may now disconnect from the audio portion of this conference.